Star Trek fans celebrate in a Toronto hotel as they look to the distant future. But some of those fans are still confronted by the ugly realities of the 20th century.
Hello and welcome to DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Susan Pettit.
And I'm Joe Coughlin. The biggest Star Trek convention ever held in Canada proved to be a humiliating experience for some of the fans. We'll meet three of them in a moment.
People who stutter are still the butt of many jokes. Later, we'll hear how they react to the way they're treated and how they can deal with the difficulties they have communicating.
We'll also look at the way wheelchair marathoners are treated by the media. In parts of the country, they are given the same coverage as other sports figures. In other areas, they are ignored.
But first, here's this week's roundup of disability news.
The Minister of National Health and Welfare, Benoit Bouchard, announced this week that $46 million will be spent on disability initiatives. The announcements represent Health and Welfare Canada's share of the federal 5-year strategy on disability announced last month. The projects are a combination of ongoing and new initiatives. Among the areas to be targeted: developing and implementing new models to improve integration for disabled persons into the community and workforce. Projects to address the problem of child abuse, including sexual abuse. Integrating special needs children into daycare services. And expanding job rehabilitation measures to help recipients of Canada Pension Plan disability benefits re-enter the workforce.
There are 700,000 disabled women in Ontario, and half of them were sexually assaulted as children. A full 83% will be sexually assaulted during their lifetimes. These statistics come from a report on sexual assault against women with disabilities that was prepared by the Disabled Women's Network in Toronto.
How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole?
This is a healing song for disabled women who have been sexually assaulted. The Disabled Women's Network says that sexual assaults take place against disabled women because they are one of the most vulnerable groups in society. In their report, the network says that victims are not treated fairly by either the police or the legal system.
Now, this report is not, shall we say, happy bedtime reading. It is a painful report, and I hope it will be treated with the respect that it should be given.
Among the main recommendations of the report, police, lawyers, and the judiciary should be re-educated concerning disabled women and the specific problems they face, and the province should take a more active role in publicizing disability issues.
25 years after the fact, the federal government has finally compensated Canadian victims of thalidomide. The compensation is a lot less than expected. Rick Ratty reports.
It takes Paul Murphy twice as long and twice the money to do what able-bodied people do. To drive this truck, he's had to spend thousands of dollars for special equipment. Recently, the federal government said it would spend $9.5 million to compensate Murphy and other thalidomide victims across Canada.
By now, the whole world knows the tragedy of thalidomide.
Thalidomide is a drug introduced in West Germany in the 1950s and 60s. It was a tranquilizer for pregnant women. It had tragic side effects. In spite of what was happening in West Germany, the drug was released in Canada. Birth defects soon showed up here. The Canadian government said it would compensate the nearly 120 people who suffered. After a 25-year battle, the government has come through.
We were hoping it would have been more, but...
How much were you hoping it would be?
We've had all sorts of numbers. We were talking at one point in the 19 to 20 mark, but I mean, what we've got is going to help out. There's no question about that.
Murphy says the $9.5 million will be distributed in 3 packages. $1 million will be used to set up support programs, although those programs have not yet been defined. $4.5 million will be divided equally among all thalidomide victims, about $30,000 each. The remaining $4.5 million will be paid to thalidomide victims according to the severity of their disability. Those with severe handicaps, for instance loss of both arms and legs, could receive as much as $100,000. Murphy says the settlement was accepted by 83% of Canada's thalidomide victims.
Sooner or later, you got to, get on with life and continue along. You can fight all the time, and it doesn't get you anywhere. What was needed right now is money into people's hands. So, satisfied. I'm satisfied that there's money.
thalidomide victims could receive their first check within weeks. Murphy says the government has promised the remainder of the package will be distributed before April. Rick Ratty, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Baltimore group opposed to the portrayal of a blind man on the ABC network sitcom Good and Evil is stepping up its campaign to have the character rewritten or the show canceled. The National Federation of the Blind complained about a recent episode in which the blind character George entered a laboratory wildly swinging a cane. George practically demolished the lab, fondled a man he thought was a woman, and made a sexual pass at a coat rack. James Gashel, a spokesman for the Federation, says that the portrayal only adds to the misconceptions society has about the blind.
The character George plays upon all of the stereotypes, the worst stereotypes that people hold concerning blindness, and emphasizes the worst characteristics that most people believe as far as blind people are concerned. It's an entirely negative portrayal of blind people. Now, although it's an extreme use of these stereotypes, to one degree or another, it's believable for a lot of people, and that's why we object to it.
ABC TV issued a statement calling the series an exaggerated parody of life. Not one character in this series is intended to be realistic or believable.
And that's this week's roundup of Disability News.
Coming up next, disabled Star Trek fans encounter familiar 20th century obstacles.